Okay, members, good evening, and you're very welcome to the June meeting of the Rural Affairs Subcommittee. In the first instance, may I take any apologies before moving on to the nomination of chair? Okay, no, yes, Councillor McCloughery.
Councillor Baird, unable to attend.
Okay, thank you. No apology from Councillor Baird. Members, any other apologies? Okay, thank you. Our second item on the agenda is to receive a nomination for the position of chair for the subcommittee, and this will be an Ulster Unionist Party nomination. So members of the Ulster Unionist Party, have we a nomination, please?
Thank you, Alison. I would like to nominate Councillor Alan Rainey, please.
Okay. I'm just not sure if Councillor Rainey is on the call at the moment, Victor, I'm just seeing.
Okay.
Not as yet. Would we maybe just take a pro tem chair, if that would be okay, to allow things to proceed? And I can certainly check.
Yeah, well,
Councillor Rainey's intention to be here.
It was his intention to be here, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But I don't know what has went wrong.
Okay, well, we'll maybe follow up in case there's an IT difficulty, and maybe I'm not sure, Victor, if you or one of your colleagues, John, maybe would like to chair in the interim.
I oppose Victor. Councillor Warrington.
Okay, Councillor Warrington.
Second that before Victor changes his mind. Okay.
Well, and we will, in the meantime, seek to contact Councillor Rainey.
Okay, no problem. Well, welcome to this Rural Affairs Subcommittee on a lovely sunny evening. Certainly after this morning, it's good to see. So the first thing to do in absence of Councillor Rainey is to sign the minutes of the previous meeting held on the 10th of March. That can be carried out certainly after this meeting. We'll now go to item number 4, which is declarations of interest. Is there any declarations of interest? There is nobody indicating, so we will move on then to go through the last meeting for matters arising. So we'll go to page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5, page 6, page 7, page 8, and page 9. Okay, there doesn't seem to be anything popping up there. So we will move on then to item number 6, which is to consider the report on Northern Ireland Multiple Deprivation Measure, Rural Deprivation Paper A.
Great, thank you very much, Chair. I'll take you through that if you're comfortable.
Okay, Alan, thank you. Yeah, away you go.
Thank you. So just you'll recall back in December 2021, I brought a paper on the multiple deprivation measure in Northern Ireland and where it had come from and the methodology that was used, and we did a similar piece of work scoping out England, Scotland, Wales and the Republic of Ireland as well, because there's been a long held view of this group and the Council in general that perhaps the multiple deprivation measure doesn't sufficiently consider rural affairs and rural issues. I was asked then to progress a bit of work to think about how we could scope out challenging the methodology that's used and try and arrive at a deprivation measure or an alternative means of measuring deprivation that would capture rurality that bit better. And I brought a verbal update to the last meeting in March just on that and where we were at. And a key part of that verbal update was engagement that I'd had with the Rural Community Network based in Cookstown. They've been through this process before. They've been very much involved in the development of the 2017 multiple deprivation measure. They were part of the formal NISR review structure. And as part of that, they had identified an alternative methodology used in the Republic of Ireland that was developed by academics called Truus Haas and Dr. Jonathan Pratska, called the POBOL deprivation measure. I referred to it in the last meeting, but I didn't have a lot of detail on it just due to the time frames between the conversation I'd had with the community network and the meeting. And I was asked just to do a wee bit of further digging and perhaps have a suggestion in terms of the way forward. Now, I'm not going to lie, I've had a look on the website and I've had a look at some of the technical documents around the alternative deprivation indices developed by Haas and Pratska, and it's academic stuff. It's heavy reading, so apologies. This is very much a summary of a summary to give you a very succinct idea of what it is and why it's different. They've developed 3 different indices, of which the first one there, the POBOL HB Deprivation Index, is the core index. That is the Republic of Ireland's equivalent to the NIMDM. They've then done a bit of work on the 2011 census to develop an all-island deprivation index, but again, that was a one-off piece of work. And then they've been doing a bit of work on a longitudinal deprivation index across 5 different census waves from 1991 to 2011. But again, it wasn't maybe as detailed as the POBOL, the primary deprivation index. The main difference is really the way it's developed. Believe it or not, as the lead officer for data science in the council, to suggest that maybe this deprivation index uses less data, and that might be a good thing. The multiple deprivation measure in Northern Ireland, I think underneath the 7 domains is at least 37 different data indicators, whereas the POBOL index in the Republic of Ireland is limited to 10 indicators in 3 dimensions. They look at the demographic profile, the social class composition, and the labour market situation. And when they talk about that in their paper and the rationale, demographic profile tends to highlight rural deprivation, people moving away, an aging population, that kind of thing. Labour market situation tends to reflect a lot of urban deprivation, and the social class kind of is fairly mixed. And some of those indicators are used across multiple of their dimensions. And the other thing is, the key thing is that they use it on census data only. So it's done after every census wave. It's previously been updated. So they're using the same indicators, they're using the same source of data, and all of a sudden you have an index that can be compared over time, which you're probably aware is a weakness of the Northern Ireland multiple deprivation measure. You're not allowed in the guidance to look at 2010 deprivation and 2017 and pick your local area and say, look at that, deprivation has increased or decreased. That's not something that's factually correct to do. For me, the key next step here is, the RCN were very kind. They've talked to me on a couple of occasions. They pointed me in the direction of this alternative HP index. But I think it would be worthwhile for this group, for this subcommittee, to invite the RCN to come and do a presentation and talk about their experience of engaging with NISR on the process. I know they had Truus Haas at a meeting with NISR to explain his methodology. For various reasons, it wasn't taken forward, and it'd be better to hear that from them than to hear it secondhand from myself. Certainly, I would invite them hopefully to the next meeting. I'll speak to them in the interim. We'll see if we can come up with what might be an alternative method, what might we want to do going forward to bring rurality more into deprivation. And I would caveat that by saying, I think there's a cost benefit consideration that needs to be given here before we would take any action. And the fact that anything I could do in-house with myself and my team, obviously wouldn't cost a significant deal of money, but probably would have very limited benefit outside of the council. But to get that benefit and to get that impact, you're going to have to engage academics to do a significant piece of work, and you'll be into hundreds of thousands of pounds. And to do that, so we'd have to look very carefully at whether the cost, the significant cost we could bear there. So I'll just caveat it with that this evening, Chair. But just the recommendation is that we note the update and that we invite the Rural Community Network to present their experience with the multiple deprivation measure and rural deprivation. So happy to hand back over to yourself, Chair, and take any questions.
Okay, thank you for that, Alan. Is there anybody, obviously, as you stated at the start of it, Alan, it is quite complex. Is there anybody has any questions for Alan, or are we happy enough that we move forward and invite these guys along to our next meeting and get them to give us maybe a clearer explanation? Sorry, I don't mean that the wrong way, Alan. I don't mean you're not giving us a clear explanation, but so are we happy enough with that? So can I have a proposer then on the Seamus? Is that, do you want to speak, or is that proposing?
Yeah, I'm willing to propose that.
Thank you. And John, do you want a second?
Yes, Chair, and thank Alan for that report. It's a very complex, and even I sort of understand what he's saying.
Okay, we'll move on to item number 7, which is to consider the report on Fermanagh and Omagh District Council Capital Plan, Urban and Rural Distribution.
Thank you, Chair. That's me again, Chair. I'm just getting the paper open here on my screen. Excuse me. So again, yes, I'll commence here, Chair, and I'll go through the paper and can take any questions at the end. So again, this is going back to the work plan, the strategic work plan for the Rural Affairs Subcommittee, and certainly resource allocation and service delivery was kind of split into two different aspects. Firstly, the local. So what are we doing as a council, as an organisation, and the money and the community funding that we distribute? How equitable are we distributing that between urban and rural areas? And then there's a second piece around central government and arm's length bodies and how they allocate resources. And you'll see that as we've dug more into this is the second paper on this kind of work stream. And as you dig into it, it's not just quite as clear cut as what the council does and what central government do, because there's instances where we get, as a council, letters of offer from central government with terms and conditions and priorities attached, and we have to work with those. So it gets a wee bit more into the grey area in this. I think it's key just to point out at the start that we sort of defined that the most appropriate benchmark to use in terms of what is equitable at the outset is the 70-30 split. So we know that 70% of our population live in rural areas, 30% in urban areas, which is largely the two main towns of Enniskillen and Omagh. And that is, all other things being equal, what we consider to be the equitable benchmark. There may be down the line some different funding streams that we look at, maybe the likes of road service, where it comes down maybe to kilometres of road or something different. But for the priorities of this work, we'll work on the 70-30 basis, and then we had agreed that at the last meeting. So this is a follow-on. The first paper was presented in March 2022. One of the appendices tonight, I think appendice 3, I've brought the whole table together. So what was presented in March, what's presented tonight, gives you a full detailed overview of various different council funding streams and the amount of money that's been spent in total, the amount of money that's been spent to rural recipients, and then obviously the percentage in that. And just again, the small caveat around for grants, that it's the postcode, if you like, the address of the headquarters of the organisation that received the grant. And even though we'd maybe be aware in some instances of maybe bigger community groups being based in the main towns that are delivering in rural areas or district wide. The paper tonight covers the capital plan. We've had to look at that separately because of the complex funding arrangements that are in place. We've looked at it for the next year, 2022-23. I think that was at a request of a council meeting. We've looked at that and I've worked in partnership with the lead officer for the capital plan on that one. And then the general council grants, which include, but are not limited to, like the Recover Grant Aid Programme post-COVID last year, the Revenue Grant Aid Programme, PCSP grants, Good Relations, and Remembering and Commemorations. And there's other grants in there as well. And hopefully it's been done in calls, and certainly it's pretty comprehensive at this point. We'll start with the capital plan. There are 46 capital projects which the council aims to progress in the next financial year, or this current financial year. As I say, it's a varied range of funding streams. Some of which are funded by the council, some of which are externally funded, some of which are a mix, and some of them are part of the wider Mid-South West project as well. And I think the key thing up front is we've had to split these projects up, and we've had to do it into 3 different ways. Those projects which are urban, they're taking place neither in Enniskillen or Omagh, and they'll primarily benefit the residents of Enniskillen and Omagh. Those which are rural, so those which are located outside of Enniskillen and Omagh, and will primarily benefit rural residents. And then we've had to make a sort of third distinction between district-wide and corporate projects. So those are projects which are corporate, they're largely with their own assets. They're maybe based in one place, but they're going to benefit all residents of the district regardless of where the project is based. And you'll see in Appendix 1 is probably important to see the split of some of those projects. And just to think things like that are district-wide and corporate would be some of the significant investment that's been made into the waste infrastructure at Dromee and Gortrush. yes, those 2 sites are based in the towns, but that is to benefit the whole of the district. The council's plans to procure ICTs, obviously a corporate project and can't be allocated urban rural. Council fleet investment, which is quite significant as well, is district wide and corporate. And you can see the split of the figures. I mean, the capital plan for next year is just over £18 million. You're looking at a 23% split in urban areas, a 40% split in rural areas, and 37% split in the district wide and corporate. And really, to look at that, that's a wee bit more complex when you add the third line in. I mean, you could look at that and say, well, 40% rural, that's low in our 70-30 benchmark. But if you flip it on its head, the 23% urban is also lower than the 30% urban. And when you remove district-wide and corporate projects, it's 64% of expenditures in rural areas. So marginally below the 70%. But again, this is 1 year's data, 1 year in the capital plan. And it's not too far away from the 70%. And I'm sure we can discuss that after. If we move on now to the range of other funding streams, and the table in the report here is very brief in comparison again to the appendice. But these have been primarily grant programs. And I say they're on the address of the recipient. And as I made the point about, sometimes the recipient is servicing a wider service area. You can see in there the total amount on the total community services call. So that's your recover and on all the rest was 841,000. Of which 633,000 or thereabouts, 633,800 was distributed rurally, 75%, and then a range of other funding streams which tended to be quite minor in comparison, on just over 114,000 distributed, of which 83,400 was distributed rurally, so 71%. So certainly, again, on those 2 funding programs, I think we're broadly equitable, and certainly in the 70-30 split, no issues there over the 3-year period. I think that the key thing when you look at Appendix 3, which brings it all together, there's a wee bit of analysis had to be done to make sure we didn't do any double counting, particularly in some of the neighbourhood renewal funding and the capital plan. There's a wee bit of overlap, so we've reduced the neighbourhood renewal funding just to make sure that there's no double counting and it all balances out. For me, when I look at that, I can see sort of a bit of a conclusion. On those funding streams like the community grants and whatnot, where the council has discretion, the distribution of resources is broadly equitable. On those where we're getting funded by a third party and we're administering that funding on behalf of a third party and we're accepting their priorities and their parameters, can be that bit more tricky and would suggest that there's a wee bit more, proportionately more of the funding going to urban areas. But as I say, that's not something that we can easily change. It's probably more of a lobbying position that we need to be in on that. For me, I think that's the key bit, the key conclusion, particularly on this stream when we're looking locally at the council. It's broadly equitable. For me, just to finish off, the next steps, I think, of this work stream in terms of where we go now, in the conversations I've had with colleagues, we've done a pretty good comprehensive job on council funding. I don't think there's much more juice to get out of that orange. I think we've got a good coverage of the data. So for me, it's to shift the focus more onto the other parties, central government, arm's length bodies. There'll be more of a challenge there in accessing that data, and I know we'd sent a stream of letters 6 months ago and had a bit of difficulty, but we'll find other ways. We've got other ideas for how we might access that data, and I think initially there'll be a bit of work that can be done in-house. We do have a database of all the letters of offer that the council has received from other bodies, and we can collate that and see how that's been split out urbanly and rurally. I think then obviously we've looked at funding and distribution of funding in the council, but we haven't maybe looked at some of the services and how they're delivered. And I'm thinking of things like leisure services and the team that we have that deliver leisure and health and wellbeing services in the community. It's a service that could reasonably be delivered outside of the 2 main centres, and we have the data on that. So certainly my plan would be to bring a paper to the next meeting, splitting that out on an urban and rural basis. And then ultimately to keep this up to date, I'm very keen that we don't do analysis that's 1 year or one funding stream. We don't make knee-jerk reactions or knee-jerk conclusions based on limited data, that we're always being comprehensive. We're always being 2 to 3 years collated together, broadly. How are we doing? Because in any one funding stream or any 1 year, there may be a greater variance from that 70-30. So just the recommendation, Chair, is that we note the analysis undertaken and we agree the proposed future direction of this work stream. So back over to yourself. Happy to take any questions through you.
Okay, thank you, Alan. I see the first speaker up is Councillor Green, but I also see that Councillor Rainey has entered the building. So Alan, we're on item number 7. Yes, Alan?
Victor, since that you're there, I'll share the remuneration with you for you just to conclude the meeting. Carry on, Victor.
Well, if you're sure. Okay, Seamus. Seamus can fill me in on the remuneration as well. Go ahead.
Yes, it's pretty good, Victor. There'll be a summer holiday for you, but anyway, what was my broadband has been very bad. I thought maybe it was a problem everywhere, but I presume everyone's hearing the presentation's okay, but it's really breaking up on this side. But anyway, a few bits and pieces that I was looking through that on Appendix 1, and there was a few things that I was kind of a wee bit confused on, and maybe Alan will be able to help me on it. For instance, the public conveniences are all rural. They are all put into the rural, I believe. So maybe that's because there's none of the ones in Omar or Enniskillen being upgraded. Maybe that can be clarified. Enniskillen Castle has been put into corporate. Lakeland Forum corporate. The Ardoan corporate. Now, as far as I'd be concerned, all three of them are urban. And I'll give the example of why I think they should be urban, because you said that it's because the average people from right across the district can use them. Well, I would suggest that Marble Arch Cave is in rural, and I would suggest everyone across the region can use the Marble Arch caves and do so. It's not just rural people use them. So I'm not sure why they're in the rural and them other ones is in corporate. And I would suspect that if that was put into the other categories, it would greatly affect the outcome on the stats. Just maybe Alan will be able to explain that.
Yeah, certainly, Chair. I did this table in partnership with the lead officer for capital plan, and we talked through it. And yes, the public conveniences are very much focused in the rural areas across a range of rural villages. So they were classified as rural. On the Enniskillen Castle is the Enniskillen Castle Archive project. It's actually not a significant expenditure in comparison to some of the other figures. And it's seen as it's an archive of museum material, and as we only have the one museum, and it's based in Enniskillen Castle, it's seen very much as something that benefits the wider district. Similarly, the leisure centre, or sorry, we'll start with the Ardoan. Similarly, the argument there's only two art centres, excuse me, across the district, so it would be inappropriate to classify those as urban, because they're there to benefit everybody in the district. They're strategic corporate assets, and we felt it would be more appropriate to consider it in that way, as in fact that the benefit of the Arts Centre, or the Ardoan Theatre in this case, is very much district wide, because there are only two of them, and they wouldn't necessarily have a very local urban audience. The Lakeland Forum, I am aware we do have leisure centre provision in rural areas, but the Lakeland Forum is kind of one of our two key leisure centres, one of the only one of two with the swimming pool, and certainly the plans to develop the Lakeland Forum on that site are strategic projects to benefit everybody in the district and even the tourism offering. So again, it wouldn't necessarily be considered that only the residents of Enniskillen would be the only beneficiaries in that. And just to caveat that, I mean, the three that you've picked out there, the strategic projects, it's an initiation phase for the Lakeland Forum and the Ardoan. The Enniskillen Castle Archive, they're, in terms of the list of the projects there and the 6.7 million expenditure, they're all quite small in that context. The big numbers on those district-wide and corporate projects tend to fall into the vehicle purchases, Drumee and Gort Rush, which I think almost those three together are almost half of that. half of that figure. Certainly, so that was a judgment call that we made, that those were strategic corporate projects as opposed to urban projects.
Yeah, and Alan, you're breaking up on me. Maybe just to follow on that, if the chair allows me, I would suggest that them projects are urban. Just as, because the example I give, if they are not urban, why is Marble Arch Caves designated as rural? Because surely they are a region-wide usage and far more than region-wide usage. People come from all over the country to see them. So I'm a bit baffled to see why, and the fact that why they are deemed rural, but them other ones in Enniskillen are deemed corporate. And I would suggest going forward, the amount of money that will be spent in them projects in Enniskillen would, I can see the reason why that they've been put into that corporate, because I think the figures would be extremely one-sided in the years going forward if them couple of projects wasn't put into some kind of a thing rather than urban.
Certainly, I apologize. The Marble Arch Caves one had missed me out, and I would suggest that the alternative idea probably should have been to move the Marble Arch Caves in as a corporate district-wide project as opposed to having it as rural. I would suggest that's probably more where the issue is. And I do have the detailed list here open, and I'm trying to find out the value of that Marble Arch Caves project, but unfortunately, it's not jumping out to me at the moment.
I could comment, Alan. I think
Yeah,
the
certainly.
Marble Arch Caves is just the money for the initial strategic outline case for the investment. So it's really I think in around 50,000 for this year to take forward that strategic outline case.
Yeah, certainly there, just looking at the data, Kim, I think it's grouped up into a parcel there of Mid-Southwest projects. I think it's even flagged in that Appendix 1 as a Mid-Southwest project. So I don't have a specific figure on that, just other than what those projects collectively are valued at.
Okay. Seamus, are you happy enough with that, or we can come back to some of these figures?
Yeah, well, I'd like to hear what other people think on it, but I'm not particularly happy with the fact that them big projects isn't deemed urban when they're in urban areas. We're really you know, the way statistics can be skewed anyway. To me, them's urban projects. Oh, like you could say any of them that's in the rural areas also can be used by anybody. I don't see that there's a that you're not allowed to use them if you're from Enniskillen and that. And I'm sure there's loads of people from Omagh goes out to the Sparran Public Art or Ecclesfield Forest or any Neath, any of them there. Like they are all used right across the district. So I'm just a wee bit confused why it has been divided this way. But anyway, that's only my views. I'll listen to other people's views as well.
Okay, Eamon?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, well, I would tend to agree with Seamus. The Lakeland Forum there, to be classified as a district-wide. The Castle Park Centre, Lisson Skis, open to everybody, no matter where they're from, I'm sure. I know it doesn't have a swimming pool, but it's classified as rural. The Bonacre would be similar. And as Seamus has said, you know, the Marble Arch Caves, I think it is skewing the figures, and I don't think it's giving us a true picture of the urban and the rural spends, because a lot of this is urban. Like. But yeah, I fully agree with Seamus. So yeah, 100%.
Okay, Stephen?
Thanks, Chair, and apologies. I mean, I possibly missed this just somewhere in the presentation, but I suppose just, I mean, I guess teasing out these definitions a little bit. I mean, is there any planned, I suppose, capital works, or is there anything kind of, I suppose, amongst this data that would be technically based or intended in a rural area, but would fall within that definition of being district wide?
Alan, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, certainly. I'm just trying to get the paper up here in front of me because of multiple different screens.
Alison, do you want to come in, or do you want to wait after Alan?
Sorry, Chair, I'm happy to contribute at this point. I think in terms of, well, two aspects, we can certainly note members' comments in relation to the definitions. I think the factual position is, and indeed we've done a lot of work on this in relation to the Lakeland Forum in particular, the catchment and the participation is right across the district, including within rural areas, and the points already been made around the swimming provision. In terms of the Councillor Donnelly's query regarding rural project or rurally located projects, which would have the urban catchment and wider catchment or district catchment, certainly that the Marble Arch Caves would be one of those. The works that we've done, for example, in Gorchin Glens over the recent years would be similar. There would be a significant uptake from the urban population, even though the investment is within the rural part of the more rural part of the district. The other elements, I suppose, in terms of wider access to the countryside and the general public access works would typically have a draw for both visitors to the district as well as those living within the towns, but also benefit the rural residents.
Okay. Stephen, are you happy enough with that?
Yeah, Chair, no, thank you. I appreciate that clarity. I mean, I suppose it's just, I mean, if we are going to kind of use these definitions, I suppose it's good to see that it actually kind of works back and forth, and that you have projects in rural areas that similarly would be district wide. But yeah, no, I'll be interested to hear what others have to say on this.
Okay, John.
Thank you, Chair. I kind of get where Seamus is coming from, but some, you know, I suppose it's difficult. We have to designate some of these, especially the larger ones. Is it specific for the people in Enniskillen and Omagh or not? I know one of the projects I'd been working on prior to COVID in another aspect of my life was with the museum, to bring stuff from the museum out into the communities and allow interested groups to put on displays and stuff from the museum within their communities. Also to give them a chance to see things that they might not normally see, and also to maybe to increase the interest and how more people maybe go to Enniskillen and visit the museum. And it's often been raised by Councillor Michael Duff, the fact that there isn't a museum in the county town for the Tyrone people, and I'll be interested for their views. But it's difficult when we're trying to designate what things are and who they actually belong to, and who uses them. And I'm sure everything within the district is available for everybody. But is Kesh Community Centre something suitable for the people from Enniskillen to come and use, or is it something more suitable for people from just Erin North, which makes it rural? And it's where we draw that line, I suppose, is difficult, and officers are trying to put everything in categories, because people like things in categories. Although generally I would accept everything's available for everybody, but I'd be interested if the museum was able to, coming back to that, to develop that project now that COVID's over at the moment, that we maybe get the museum thing back, that it is coming out to the communities rather than being something isolated away from them in Enniskillen, as Seamus identifies.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, there's been quite a bit of contribution to that.
Would it be possible just to have one more quick comment on that, just when I listen to everyone else?
Okay, go on ahead, Seamus. Be quick, please.
Thanks, Victor. No, we're talking about putting everything into groups and or into their own categories. I would suggest that it's very simple to put it into groups. It's urban or rural. I would suggest you call it that's the way it's done. I would also suggest that the vast majority of people that use the Lakeland Forum are from Enniskillen, and the vast majority of people that use Omagh Leisure Centre are from Omagh. That's just the reality of the thing. But the other one that I don't think was answered, and maybe my broadband broke up, was the public conveniences. They are all in rural. Is there none of the public conveniences that's in the urban centres being upgraded?
Bring
Sorry.
Alison in there.
Yeah, sorry, Chair. I should have that's quite correct, Councillor Green. The programme, and that was because the initial works that were undertaken on the public conveniences prior, I suppose, to this rollout were within the towns. So the areas that require upgrading are the rural parts of the district. So none of the capital programme that's highlighted here relates to works at the public conveniences within the two main towns.
Okay, thank you for that, Alison. Right, we've discussed this quite a bit, and there's obviously is going to be more work on it in the future. So at this stage, can I take a proposer for the recommendations, please? Okay, Councillor McCloughery proposed. Can I have a seconder? Councillor Stephen Donnelly. Thank you. We will move on to the next item, and that is item number 8, and that is to consider update report on transport poverty update paper C.
Great, thank you, Chair. That's also myself. This is a piece of work now. I'm very excited about it. I do believe we're breaking new ground with this bit of work, accessing data that we haven't previously accessed and trying to answer a question that's been kicking around for a while that has maybe lacked an actual robust answer. But we've always known transport poverty is an issue, that getting around from Omagh district requires a car. It's a very difficult thing to try and do on a bus alone. And this is one of the research projects within the Rural Affairs Strategic Work Plan. Back in January this year, we commissioned a company, Basemap Limited, to open access publicly available information on Open Data NI and analyse and give us data on the frequency of bus routes in the district. So not just the lines that are on the Translink website to tell you where there's a bus route, but actually how frequently is that bus route serviced, and how frequently does a bus stop at any one of those stops. And that's actually the results of that have been largely headline, have been reported back in the March 2022 meeting. There was a good debate at that meeting. I was very encouraged at the recommendations they got back, and they added a lot of value, and we have moved forward with them. And that's really just to update you on that. So I was asked back in March 2022, largely just due to the time constraint, I was given you headline figures in terms of hospitals and GPs, but nothing was split out. But I was asked to go away and split that out so we could look at each individual hospital and each individual GP practice and the percentage of the population who could access that using public transport only, or a bit of walking within 2 hours. And that's all been done now. And I'm very grateful to the Council's GIS officer and our graduate GIS assistant who did a lot of the primary work on that. We really realised that actually the data we had from January 2022 was a reduced COVID-19 timetable. So that's immediately a significant weakness to the piece of work, and it would be remiss to take it forward without looking to get that updated to a time when Translink are running a full service timetable. It's too much of an underlying weakness, but we've worked ahead with the data we have. We've engaged Basemap. They've given us a quote for the next stage of the analysis. We've spoken to Translink, and they can confirm that the latest data that they have on Open Data NI is a full service timetable. So pending tonight's meeting and the comments around it, hopefully, if feedback's positive, we'll press ahead and get that commissioned, and we'll have to start the whole splitting out process again. And unfortunately, our GIS officer is very aware of that, and it'll take a bit of time, but certainly it can be done. And also, it was remiss in the first round not to include Belfast hospitals and any regionally specialist sites in the analysis, and the fact that we know that people from Omagh district have to travel primarily to Belfast hospitals. So we did include Altnagelvin the first time around, and we'll continue to conclude that, but that we'd missed the Belfast hospitals, and that was really something that we should include. Essentially, as I said, the analysis is done across 6 time periods. Just unfortunately, it's not practical to get a 24/7 coverage of this kind of thing, and taking advice from BaseMap, who do this kind of work all the time. We picked 3 time periods: peak morning, afternoon, mid-morning to afternoon, and peak evening, to do it on a weekday and on a weekend, and to consider both outbound and inbound trips. And in total, there's 6 different runs of the data. And accessibility varies greatly depending on the time period. And naturally, you tend to find 7 to 9 tends to be reasonable in terms of getting places. But that getting home at 11 to 1, if you imagine getting to the hospital for 9 o'clock, doing an hour's appointment, it could be quite a long time before you can access a bus again to get home. It provided a good overall estimation of the people who could access a hospital or GP practice within 2 hours, and 2 hours has become the natural cutoff. It's as far as we can go with the analysis. We can't go to 2.5 or 3 hours. It's anything beneath 2 hours up to a maximum of 2 hours. And we realize that 2 hours might be fine for a hospital, but for a GP practice, we might want to be a bit more sensitive around that. A 2-hour trip from your house to your GP practice is probably too much. It's probably something people wouldn't find palatable, and they might find it palatable for a hospital. So we will, as we continue the analysis, maybe look to limit that 2 hours down to 1 hour or 45 minutes, or even half an hour, and we do have the ability to do that. I mean, you'll see in Appendix 1 a detailed table of all the GP practices in the district and the 5 hospitals that we had analysed. And you can see that ranges in terms of the hospitals. I mean, 33% of residents in Fermanagh and Omagh district can get to the SWA hospital within less than 2 hours using only public transport between 7 a.m. and 9 a.m. That's the way to analyse that first table. Interestingly, there's no routes that can get you to Craigavon in under 2 hours in the Fermanagh and Omagh District Council area, largely because the buses that go to Belfast bypass Craigavon, and you're going to have to do a change at either Dungannon or Belfast. And then you'll see the range of GP practices there. And there's been a wee bit, I suppose, of complexity in terms of the analysis we had to do that. Obviously, a hospital is quite straightforward because you can use the total population of the Fermanagh and Omagh district as your denominator on the second half of that to calculate a percentage. It's not so straightforward for a GP practice because there are so many of them. And if you did that, or you even used the practice size of any individual GP practice, you would end up with weird results. In some cases, where over 100% of the practice list can make it to the GP practice in less than 2 hours using public transport. So then that's just silly numbers, really. That wouldn't be robust. So what our GIS officer did and took the lead on, and I was involved just in guiding that as well, but it was very much his own work, was did a bit of modelling to create a perfect world where you made an assumption that all GP practices in Fermanagh and Omagh, I think there's 19 of them in total. We had to unfortunately remove the 2 outside of the district for this analysis. Imagine that they only serve people in the Fermanagh and Omagh district, and that everybody in the Fermanagh and Omagh district was registered at a GP, which again, probably not factually true. But what might a natural catchment or service area look like? And really that was all to do to what we called making the data spatially relevant. So the percentages there are the percentage of people within that catchment area, that notional catchment area, that can access the GP practice within 2 hours. It's not perfect, we're assuming too much, but in the absence of any other way of doing it, it is the best way, and it's clear to point out that we've been consistent in terms of how we do it. The one thing I should just point out at this stage in terms of that's not in the paper, that only became apparent this in the last number of days, is that we've actually potentially missed 2 practices in this initial run of analysis, and I'll be clear to hear tonight if I've missed any others. We've missed Tempo because the Tempo GP surgery is what I would call a satellite practice of Dr. Crummy and partners in Brookborough. So all the data talks about their practice being headquartered in Brookborough. Tempo's not mentioned, but I know from local knowledge there is a practice in Tempo, and certainly adding Tempo will change the figures. And equally in Gorchin, the Gorchin GP practice is a satellite of the GP practice based primarily in Plumbridge. So certainly when we take this analysis forward to the next stage of updating, we'll include those, and that will certainly change some of those percentages, and it'll definitely change. I think the Irvinstown percentage there, which I've highlighted in red, just it feels a wee bit weird, a wee bit off in terms of how we've done that, just because of the way the catchment area was interpreted. But it's certainly the data is fine for use, just with a wee bit of caution. I think the overarching conclusion is under no circumstance really there beyond the Irvinstown link. Is there significant connectivity from people's houses to their GP practice using only public transport? I don't think that's skewed at all. In terms of including the Belfast hospitals, I've had a look online. I think, excuse me, the Belfast City Hospital, the Royal Victoria Hospital in Belfast, the Ulster Hospital in Dundonald and Musgrave Park, in addition to the other 5 hospitals that we have, were those that I'd be looking to add. And again, it'd be part of the recommendation tonight. If anybody has any thoughts on anything missing there, I'd be here to hear it. We have engaged with TransLink on a technical level. We've had a couple of different conversations with a couple of different people in TransLink. They're content. They're very glad that we're doing this in a robust way, that we're using evidence. We're taking a very evidence-led approach to this. Everything's factually correct. We're very open about the caveats in the analysis, and they're keen to engage in the project again as and when required. And I think for the next few engagements we have with TransLink will be on a technical level. And when we get to the stage where the analysis is complete, then I think we'll want to maybe have a strategic conversation with TransLink and the Department for Infrastructure about the issues we've identified and what might be the best models or methods going forward to try and alleviate those issues. And it'd be wrong of me to conclude just without paying great thanks to our partners through community planning on this, from Manada Community Transport and EasyLink Community Transport. I mean, without them, this project wouldn't exist. It was their kind of idea, throwing a few ideas around about what we could do. Myself and a couple of other council officers have taken it forward, but we've worked in tandem, and we get a lot of guidance from them, both on where we've arrived to at this point, and where we think the analysis and the project needs to go. And I've included tonight as one of the appendices the performance report card from that community plan in action, because I think it's important to see where this analysis fits in context. So it's not just a piece of analysis that we're going to do, and we're going to produce a lot of maps, some of which are appendices tonight as well, but certainly not all of them. There's over 100 maps that could be produced from the data we have, and I didn't want to clog the list of appendices. But certainly this piece of work's not in isolation. We know we've got a rough idea now of where this is going. We want to finish it off, get it updated, get it finished off, and then move into those other key considerations about who's transport poor, who are people that are most vulnerable at being in transport poverty, and overlay this public transport analysis part of it to give us a full picture, and then complete the research and start the lobbying. I think essentially is what it boils down to. So the recommendation tonight, Chair, is that we note the ongoing progress of the transport poverty project. I think if we proceed with that and we get the analysis updated, it might not be September, it might be the subsequent meeting probably in December before we're bringing anything significant back. Just there's a bit of a time period required there to analyse that. And just to support the updating of that analysis and agree the list of specialist hospitals, and certainly if anybody's aware from looking at that list of GPs as well, using the local knowledge, if I've missed any, I apologise, it wasn't intentional. It was just that the data source we used was, like many things, focused only on the headquarters and not on the satellite locations. So happy to hand back to yourself, Chair, and take any questions.
Okay, thank you for that, Alan. Well, the fourth person indicating is Councillor McCloughery.
Thank you, Alan. Yet again, an amazing amount of information there. I'm glad to see you updating it. I mean, my father-in-law is able to get a train, a 2-minute walk to the train station, and go to the city hospital from Portrush to Belfast, and he never has to change or anything. It's a great for my wife and us being so far away from him. It's great reassurance for her to know that he's able to do that sort of journey without having to do any changes, and he's able to get home even outside the rush hour. Then there's a train every 2 hours, and then in the evening, then they're back on every hour in the evening commute home again. So it'll be and I mean the fact that we can't actually go directly to any of those, even though the buses are travelling, yet you can get a bus to Dublin, and I've often done it, and you get dropped off at the airport at Terminal 1 or Terminal 2. It seems quite strange that we can't do that for people who are sick, but you can do it for somebody heading off on their holidays. Just to add to your woes, the Castlederg group have a surgery in Ederney, which people in the Kesh, Ederney, Lack, Drumquin type area. So that would be another surgery for you to include on your list.
Excellent,
which is probably going to make it more complicated.
No, not at all. No, it's
not
important to get this right. I was really hoping to tap into the local knowledge tonight, and certainly I'll scope that out and add that to the list.
Yeah, it's Dr. Hare and Dr. King are usually there are. I think there's a Dr. Green as well, but it's usually Dr. Hare or Dr. King that you see in Ederney. But they're part of the Castlederg group. So thank you very much again, Alan, and it's a lot of work, but I'm going to propose that we go ahead and with this updated and go for the full information. So thank you, Alan.
And including the recommendations in that, Councillor McCloughery?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Okay. Okay. Can I put your hand down, please? Can I have a seconder for the recommendations?
I'm happy to second it, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Rainey. Okay, there's nobody else indicating. So we will move on. And the next thing on the agenda is correspondence. Alison, is there any correspondence?
No correspondence, Chair.
Okay, we then have any urgent and relevant business. Well, obviously, because of the changeover of chair tonight, I'm not aware of anything.
I'm sorry, Chair, if I may interrupt at this stage. It's just to advise we have a piece of business which we've uploaded to Decision Time. It's our Rural Needs Annual Monitoring
I
Report.
see it, yes, I
Yep.
see it on it here.
Now, it is just we wish to just draw to members' attention this evening, but to advise that it will be included within the papers for consideration at next week's Policy and Resources Committee meeting. So we just wanted to highlight that, Chair. I'm not sure if anyone wishes to raise queries on it this evening, they can, or you may wish to wait until next Wednesday evening.
Okay, thank you for that. I don't see anybody indicating to raise queries on that. So, okay.
Sorry, Victor. My broadband just went down there, and I didn't hear Alison. Is it only mine that's doing this, or?
Yes, only yours, Seamus.
All right. No, I didn't hear what Alison was saying there. But,
well, basically, just that the report on Rural Needs Annual Monitoring Report is going to be brought to P&R next week, unless
right.
anybody has any comments on it tonight.
No, that's fine.
Okay. That brings us to the end of the meeting. Thank you.
Chairman, before you close the meeting, my apologies. I had trouble accessing as well. And I want to say thank you to you for chairing the meeting for me.
Nope.
And I look forward to taking up the challenge next time.
No problem. Obviously, I am glad to say, and I suppose this is directed towards Alan Rainey and Seamus. I have now got fibre to the premises, and I took out the entry level, and I'm running at speeds of around 140 megabytes of a download. So I have to say it's a fast change in what we've been used to in this area for so long. So I can only hope that the rest of us can avail of it sooner rather than later. So
well, I have to say that the ducks already laid from the end of the avenue up to the farmyard, and in the near future maybe I'll be able to get a line as well.
Very good, very good. So I hope the rest of the rural councillors can move along as well with it, because I know it's frustrating. Okay, yeah. Thank you everybody for your participation, and we can go back to the new councillor, new chair next month or the next meeting. So thank you everybody, and it's a good night from me, and it's a good night from everybody else. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Good night. Bye.